Hey guys, Steve Austin here, and as we already know, we are not meeting again this week, and who knows when we will be meeting, right? So, anyway, we are getting ready to watch. I'm sure you are getting ready to watch session 4, part A and B, and your leaders already have that material, and I'm sure they have already sent that out to you. So I would strongly encourage you to get somewhere and carve out a little bit of time and use this time wisely. And I think one of the wisest ways that we can use our time is to continue the process that we've started. In fact, I think this will really give you a great perspective in the midst of what's going on nationally and internationally. So I would strongly encourage you to continue that process. So also just want to add in just a couple of little things here, and I just want to come to you for the next few days in a row. Just kind of thinking through this process. I have a friend of mine, and we went on a little racing trip at some point a few months back, and he said, Steve, man, I just get sideways sometimes. So as we started sharing, I just kind of started sharing some truths with him that I have discovered in my own life when I get sideways. So I'm using his term, when he gets sideways. So when I get sideways, there are a couple of little things that have really stood out to me, and it really helps me switch that lens again. Instead of seeing God through life's lens, I really try to see life through God's lens. And so in the midst of that process, I just kind of wrote down quite a few things. So I actually limited those to about 20 truths. So for the next few days, if that's okay with you, we'll send you just a little short clip kind of explaining each one of those, and just really want to use that to encourage your heart in the midst of this season that we're walking through. So as I start, today's will probably be a little bit longer, just because I'm setting the stage for the rest of it. So we're in one of the most uncertain times in modern American history as we are experiencing this now. There's never been a time, even after 9/11, that the entire country really was virtually shut down. So, we always have choices. God gives us choices wherever we are, and we have the ability to either react to the set of circumstances that are going on, or to act. And to react means that we are engaged emotionally, and we are reacting to the things that are going on, and that tends to heighten frenzy and emotionalism in the midst of our circumstances. But instead of that choice, I'm encouraging us to act in the midst of this process. And what that means is, again, to, instead of looking at God and looking at truth through the lens of the circumstances, switch that lens. Pastor Brady really was good about talking about being sent today. And being sent today means that we are an agent of change, and we help people see through the right lens, and we help them interpret the circumstances through what we know to be true about who God is and Him sending and allowing these circumstances. So for the next 20 days, I want to encourage you with a very specific truth. As you're learning in the midst of your Getting Your Life on Target series, truth sets us free, and if truth sets us free, the flip side of that is that lies continue to hold us in bondage. So, what I've noticed in life is that lies are easier to believe because they feel more real, and we experience those on a deeper level and on a much more consistent basis. So when I get sideways in my thinking, I have to stop and remind myself of these specific truths. And again, for the next few days, I'll be sending you one of these out every day with a little short snippet of kind of what that means to live according to that truth. So, number one, first truth I want to share with you, and just think about this and say this to yourself in the midst of where you are when you feel those emotions starting to trigger that frenzy inside of you. And here it is. Number one, first one of these. God has me and God has us right here, right now, in the midst of this situation. I know that's super simple, and I know that doesn't seem very profound. As we add a lot of these together, I think it'll make sense to start off very simple and then move our way into some of these deep truths. But let me expand on that just a little bit. So God has a strategy, and that strategy is something that He is basing His decision to either send or allow something to come into our lives, either on an individual level, at family, corporately, as we worship as a church, in our community, in our country, in our land, in all of His creation, whatever that might be. God has a strategy within His creation to bring about the fruition of His purposes. And this is a time for us to act instead of react to the set of circumstances, and this can allow us to reframe the direction that God is motivating our lives within. You know, we have a tendency to get super busy. And when we get super busy, we lose the ability to hear that still, small, quiet voice inside of us that God is leading us to listen to. So I'm reminded this morning as I was walking through the sanctuary, and there was one person in it that was my boss, Bob Landum. And Bob stopped me this morning and he said, you know, one of the simplest truths that has made the most sense in a time like this is the 95-5 principle. Now, you guys have already been learning about that 95-5 principle. 95% of my time I spend in silence listening to God, in my quiet time, in my prayer time, and 5% of my time I'm actually talking to Him about whatever's going on. I practice that on a daily basis, and I believe that principle is one of the easiest to communicate and one of the easiest practices to put into place to really stop during this season of downtime, where we can put aside the busyness of everyday life. You know, it's almost like that's been forced upon us. And even in the midst of being forced upon us, that is still something that God can use in a big way to set our hearts free and give us perspective. So I will be practicing that on a regular basis, and I encourage you to do the same. So to sum this all up, here's our truth in a nutshell. Nothing can come into your life that God doesn't either send or allow. Therefore, you can engage, you can embrace wherever you are, and we can learn to enjoy those significant processes because they really are working for us. And here's why. Because God has me, God has us right here, right now, within the midst of this situation. Dive in to session 4 this week and get in that target practice. Fulfill it. I promise you. God will be working in the midst of your circumstances to give you a new perspective. Thank you, and God bless. See you soon.